This segment of the Alice Stewart Show is brought to you by the Countertop Store, Central Arkansas's premier countertop authority. For custom fabrication and installation of granite, tile, laminate, copper, and more, the Countertop Store, 888-510-4773.
And we're back on the Alice Stewart Show, 722, joined in studio this hour with Julie Benafield. She is owner of the Benafield Group and former Arkansas Insurance Commissioner. And you know about healthcare and insurance.
Well, I pretend to.
Well, you do very well.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to continue the conversation about health care and the Affordable Care Act and how it's playing into midterm elections. And we've got just over 60 days until the all-important midterm elections, and health care is a factor in the important U.S. Senate race and that for Arkansas governor. Here to talk about that, we're joined with Andrew Demillo. He is the Capitol correspondent for the Associated Press. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate you joining us. And you have written an article on this issue. And clearly, we'll start off with the big picture. Democrats Mark Pryor and Mike Ross, as you point out, took different positions on the president's federal health care overhaul, which is Obamacare. Now they are running in two of the hottest races in the state, and we're seeing health care front and center in a lot of the campaign, the ads and the speeches and the messaging of those two races. Let's start with Mark Pryor running against Congressman Cotton in the U.S. Senate race. Your thoughts on how health care and Obamacare is affecting that race?
Well, it's definitely an issue that has been kind of overshadowing this race, even though we've seen multiple other issues coming up. And like I said in the story, Pryor and Ross are kind of in the same boat in terms of they're both having to navigate around this law, around this issue, and really find ways to embrace key parts of the law that may be popular in a state where Republicans have had a lot of success running against the Affordable Care Act. In Senator Pryor's case, what we've seen is the ad that he did recently, where he really talked about it in personal terms. Talked about his fight with cancer, and talked about coverage being denied to people with pre-existing conditions, and that really got a lot of national attention because it was seen as an ad that was talking about the healthcare law without actually mentioning the healthcare law, without using the words Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And really, kind of focusing on parts of the law that have been very popular, while staying away from a label that Republicans have really been able to make politically toxic here.
And it's interesting, as we are having this conversation, there's a new ad that just came out, and Roby Brock mentions it on talkbusiness.net about that very ad. The Republican group Crossroads GPS kind of went after him for not referring to it as Obamacare, referring to it as health care law. So this is a classic case of what you mentioned, that this is going to be a big factor in this campaign.
Yeah, definitely, and it shows that Republicans really do see the label, using the term Obamacare, really see that as an effective strategy. The fact that they've got this ad buy up pretty quickly after Pryor had done this ad.
And that's something that Congressman Tom Cotton will continue to remind voters of, that Senator Pryor voted for Obamacare and has touted its benefits. So do you expect to see this as a central focus of the campaign? We've got a lot of other issues. We have, the crisis at the border. We have certainly foreign policy issues that are really escalating. But do you see the Affordable Care Act being a central focus in this race through November?
I see it being a recurring theme, and I think we're going to see it keep coming up in different ways. Really, it's been kind of the one recurring issue throughout this campaign for more than a year now. So I wouldn't expect that to slow down.
And also in the race for governor, we're seeing that quite a bit as well. We have Mike Ross, who voted the Affordable Care Act out of committee, but ultimately voted against it. Yet we are seeing in the race for Democrat Mike Ross against Republican Asa Hutchinson, we're seeing that healthcare is a focus in that race as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Ross, Ross and Pryor had split on the Affordable Care Act. Ross had voted for a form of healthcare legislation in committee, but voted against the legislation that ultimately became law.
Right.
And we're seeing in this race kind of a similar thing with Ross in terms of embracing key parts of the law. For him, it's the private option, the compromised Medicaid expansion here. He's really been, focusing a lot on his support for it, his support for reauthorizing it, and criticizing Asa Hutchinson for not saying whether or not he'd reauthorize the program. Hutchinson has criticized Ross over his vote for healthcare legislation in committee, and has kind of been running on a similar anti-healthcare law, anti-Obamacare message that we've seen in the Senate race.
My guest, Andrew Demillo, he's the Capitol reporter at the Associated Press. And Andrew, on that note, you point out in your article here that Ross, on the private option, that Medicaid expansion, it talks about, as a Christian, I think it's the right thing to do. I'm going to do my best as governor to continue and fund it. And you point out that Hutchinson, for his part, has stopped short of saying whether he'd support continuing the program, and he wants to review its progress. So do you see in this issue both sides continuing to really press their opponent on this?
Yeah, I think so, and the private option adds a whole new dynamic that we've talked about before with the divide that we've seen among Republicans on it. So even though the healthcare law and as an issue it's going to be tricky for Democrats to navigate their way around, the private option scenario where it's going to be just as tricky for Republicans. It
is, and we'll, I'm sure, see many more quotes and comments from both campaigns, with Senator Pryor versus Congressman Tom Cotton in the all-important Senate race, and Mike Ross versus Asa Hutchinson for governor. Andrew Demillo, Capitol correspondent for Associated Press. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and without a doubt, Julie, I think we're going to see Obamacare and private option mentioned many times in both of those races through November.
Absolutely. I tell you, a few months ago, I thought maybe it was going to just die on the vine, but things keep coming up. I should have known better. I should have known that there were going to be other things to keep Obamacare alive, and I think we will see it mentioned over and over.
Yes, yeah. That Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act in the Senate race and the private option in the governor's race. So it's not going away. We're going to take a break. Julie will be back. We'll talk more health care and health insurance here on the Alice Stewart Show. This segment of the program brought to you by the Countertop Store, 9817 Maumelle Boulevard, or give them a call, 888-510-4773.